Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Ponyo, or Ponyo on the Cliff by the Sea, from 2008. And this concludes my series of reviews where I try to review all of the films of Studio Ghibli and the early works of Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, and this is the last review of that series, at least in terms of feature films. When you look at Ponyo and you look at the subject matter, it feels a lot like Miyazaki's going back to something he's done before. I think what's hidden within Ponyo is that he really put a lot of intense work into the animation. It's not like, sure, maybe him doing a story like this isn't as intensely and masterful in terms of the storytelling as he usually is, but in terms of the animation, he's just as there as he ever was before. In fact, I feel like he looked more at the animation in this film than the actual storytelling. Look at how freeform a lot of, especially the character of Ponyo is. There's a million different fish in this movie. Apparently, to map out all the different character designs they had of fish in this film, they had thousands and thousands of drawings and thousands of character designs just to have all the different fish, from prehistoric fish to current fish. And very few fish actually repeat in this film. There's always interesting things to look at underwater. It does have more of a storybook feel to it, a looser feel to it, and it feels like he's being a lot more experimental than you'd really expect from what I guess a more traditional animated film, especially from a Hayao Miyazaki film. He's experimental in certain ways, but not in terms of character design and playing with lines and animation as much as he does. And after Howl's Moving Castle, that uses a lot more computer animation than he had ever used before, it seems like he decided to forget all of that and have more of a looser, more like a preschool kid's storybook kind of style, but use all of the artistry he usually brings to an animated film to really make this film come alive. A little fish named Ponyo who runs away from her father, a wizard under the sea called Fujimoto. Then she travels to the world of man and above ground and soon meets Sosuke, and they become fast friends, and she starts to fall in love with him, and after touching his cut and healing him and getting some of his DNA in her blood, she starts becoming more and more human and decides to come to the surface and become human because she loves Sosuke so much. But after she decides to do that, it puts the whole planet out of whack and has environmental problems where a tsunami starts hitting this town and hitting the world as everything is out of whack as she starts becoming more and more human to fall in love and be with Sosuke. This is Hayao Miyazaki's very Little Mermaid influenced film. He actually said he was inspired to do this after watching Disney's The Little Mermaid. He's often said that he was very influenced by Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid also. I'm not exactly sure what influenced him more, but it is a very kind of Little Mermaid-esque kind of movie. It semi-reminds me of what Pedro Almodovar did with The Skin I Live In, which is kind of a riff on Eyes Without a Face. This is kind of like Miyazaki's Little Mermaid, but he changes the story a lot. So much so that I almost want to call it a semi-riff on The Little Mermaid, like Miyazaki's like, let's make it more Japanese, let's have more fun with the animation, let's make it more of a preschool story. He definitely does have a lot of fun with it and brings his own style into it, makes it more of an original divergence on The Little Mermaid, which I kind of like about it. It's kind of interesting when people take these kind of odd avenues through storytelling. I don't really think it is too different. It doesn't feel challenging. It does feel like an artist going back to something they know they can do very well and successfully. In some ways, that's the thing you knock about Ponyo. I've always thought certainly it's a lot better than Howl's Moving Castle because it actually works very well. It kind of gets exactly what it wants, and it does exactly what you think it should do for a Miyazaki film, and it doesn't really surprise you, doesn't grab you as much emotionally, and sure, the animation is very interesting. He is an older director at this point, and older directors do try to do something that they just know they can do very well, and I guess this is Miyazaki's entry for that in terms of a filmography. But it's still a decent film. Sure, I wouldn't rank it with some of his best works. I don't think that's necessarily something that demotes it entirely. It's still a very good film, and I think what he gets a lot about making a preschool film, first off, is there's not really a lot of G films anymore. I don't think I've actually seen a G film in theaters since I saw this film in theaters, and it shows someone who wants to have more of an interesting, more of an experimental view on doing a preschool film. Most of the time when you hear a preschool film or a film that's rated G, you change the channel or you ignore its existence, and I think Miyazaki kind of came at it with more artistry than I've ever seen for certainly the G rating. There are usually shows that you couldn't really watch after you're a certain age because you'd feel really stupid, and Ponyo doesn't do that. It feels a lot younger than you're used to for him, and that doesn't feel as exciting. He does diverge from that a little, but not too much. You're really stuck in this preschool world, but he seems to have fun in that. With this film, it's like he concentrated more on the animation than the story. Not to say the animation in his films is lesser than the storytelling, but it felt like the storytelling was very different and interesting. And in this, it's like, it feels kind of similar for him, whereas the animation feels so alive and invigorating and has this great energy to it. The animation itself gets you more into it. And it's not a terrible story. It just feels almost conventional within his own style, which isn't as exciting. When you have someone who's done so many exciting and different films, and most of Miyazaki's filmography, I'd say, is exceptionally good and different from one another, it kind of almost shows him more as almost like, not that he was a studio director in terms of that he was selected by a studio, but almost that he knows what he needs to do to get the job done, but is still finding ways to artistically express himself. And he liked doing Ponyo enough that he actually considered quite heavily making a sequel to this film. He didn't. He ended up being convinced by Toshio Suzuki to eventually make The Wind Rises, which was his last film. Maybe it shows an older man who's like, you know, the storytelling thing, I've done so much with it, why not do more of what Takahata does? Takahata, like, look at Kaguya, look at Pompoko, look at My Neighbor the Yamadas. My Neighbor the Yamadas in this probably shares a lot because that's very much a family-friendly film. It's the kind of film you don't expect a lot of interesting and experimental animation just based on the subject matter, and I think Ponyo is the same way. I like how he does the character of Ponyo and how expressive she is throughout it. Although this film was a huge wide release in Japan and made a ton of money when it was released there and had one of the widest openings of all time, or at least at the time in 2008, Disney actually gave this film one of the widest releases that a Miyazaki film would ever get in America. The Wind Rises didn't get such a wide release. Studio Ghibli did have a wider release with The Secret World of Arrietty, but this would be the widest release for Miyazaki. Melissa Matheson, who wrote the script for E.T., helped come up with the script for the American actors in the English dub that Lasseter, of course, directed once again. It didn't end up doing that well. It opened at number 9, but for an animated film from Japan, it actually is pretty high up there, which is kind of sad considering how much money those films make on DVD and everywhere else, but apparently theatrically they don't really make very much. I actually saw it opening weekend, and I had a choice between this and District 9, and I chose this over District 9. In retrospect, I think District 9 is way better than this, but I was so happy to have seen a Studio Ghibli film given a wide release. I was like, well, I have to do this. I have to support it. After Arrietty, they split ways, and there's certain things about the way they handled this, they handled very well. They gave it a huge release. You know, they brought Miyazaki to Comic-Con. They really pushed it. But at the same time, they got like Miley Cyrus's sister and the Jonas Brothers' younger brother to do the voices of the kids, which felt a little weak. I mean, they did decent performances from what I remember. I saw the Japanese track this time. They got like Lily Tomlin and Tina Fey and Matt Damon and Liam Neeson. I feel like that was a bit of a demotion almost for most people, because if you weren't seeing it already for Studio Ghibli, you'd go, oh, I don't really like either of those people, and that was kind of their main selling point when they were selling it. I don't think that was the most respectful thing to do. He based Sosuke on his son Goro Miyazaki, so maybe their relationship's not so bad. But he apparently really did want to make kind of a preschool kind of film, and I actually like that he at least tried to make that kind of a movie for preschool age children and did it with such vigor and such excitement to it, and the animation was so lovingly created. And I love those water fish things. They're like water that has a spell under it that looks like fish. Apparently he really liked animating the water, and the water in this film is probably some of the best animated water I've seen since like Pinocchio. Pinocchio's always kind of gone down as being probably one of the best traditionally animated films of all time. I'm not talking about the quality of the film, I'm talking just the quality of the animation, and I think some of the water is animated just as good as Pinocchio, and he really wanted to get more back into the traditional mindset and really have a lot of love and care brought to the animation in Ponyo, and you can really feel that throughout it. I think if this had been done in his regular style, I would have liked it a lot less. It just gave it such an amazing energy and such a loving energy towards it, and I think kids can get into that. I think that can be infectious, and whether they know it or not, I love the animation in this, and that was partly why I really liked watching it. But I think watching it now after having seen all these films and knowing all I know about Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, it just doesn't feel as amazing and original anymore at this point. It just doesn't hold up as much. You know, it does feel like a lesser work by a director, but it feels like a work where he was more concerned with the animation. But I think it still shows how great of an animation director he really was. The same thing with Howl's Moving Castle. It's like it doesn't really show the amazing storyteller necessarily. I don't know why he wasn't as into that, what his reasoning was. Maybe he was just more interested in drawing and doing the animation at this point in his life. Well, I think The Wind Rises does a much better job at showing him as the storyteller than this does. It's kind of interesting he'd make this kind of film because it does feel so much like something he has done before, but I think it shows someone who, as much as he looks like he's gotten comfortable in terms of subject matter, can still find an amazing and interesting thing to do with a film and make it exciting and have an energy about it. And I think that shows how great of a director he really could be. Even though this story-wise is kind of lesser, he gave it a lot of energy and really showed off animation and showed the amazing qualities that animation can do. And in that way, I think in animation-wise, it holds up just as well, even if the story doesn't necessarily do that. So if you have seen Ponyo and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this is the end of my Studio Ghibli review series. In terms of feature films, I will try to do some of the animated series probably later on, but I'll take probably a bit of a break. If you would like to see my original Ponyo review, which I made after seeing it the very first time in 2009, that is online and there will be an annotation for that also, and you can check that out. I hope this review is a lot better than that one. But thank you very much for watching the Studio Ghibli review series. Thank you to all of you who have watched all of it. If you're wondering why haven't I reviewed From Up on Poppy Hill or The Secret World of Arrietty or The Wind Rises, I actually reviewed those before doing this series, and although this is kind of an extra video because it had been so long since I had seen and reviewed Ponyo, and that review wasn't really that good, so I felt like I should re-review it. Those three I don't feel that I really should do that with. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. It just gave it such an amazing energy, but it